This week on Three Big Things, Mike's going to touch a little bit on Hot Rod Magazine Drag Week. Alex is going to talk about safety routines and how this 2 to 3 month layoff has affected them. And I'll finish things up with a little bit about NASCAR's Wednesday night show and what drag racing might be able to learn from it. Mike, let's get this thing started.
Yeah, so Hot Rod Magazine Drag Week, it's September 13 to 18. And, it's a great tour. I know Alex has been on it several times. I was going to come back with my buddy Mike Javanis this year. And there's been a lot of talk on some of the social media forums that are dedicated to it about what's going to happen. And, it's, 5 tracks, 5 days. And 2 of those tracks, one's in Michigan, one's in Illinois. And those are huge question marks in the motorsports community. I know Byron Dragway, which is the Illinois stop, which I think is the 3rd or 4th day on the tour. And it's, they're opening for track rentals, but what are they going to do? Can they operate for drag week? And Michigan, it obviously continues to be a very sore subject across the country with opening up. And, I think Hot Rod has some challenges as this date gets closer. What are they going to do with this tour? I know Keith Turk has said, who's the tech director, has said they are still a go as far as he knows. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out as those dates do get closer and in the 2 states that are very alarming, how they react right now.
It's tough, and that's not something that can be just easily moved. Like the infrastructure required, I have not done the entire tour, but I've hit a handful of stops, and I've done the entire Hot Rod Power Tour, and it's just the production that is required to execute those events and get people from place to place. It's not like you can change your mind and just reschedule it somewhere else a week or 2 out. The only thing I'll say is that I hope, as we've seen, hopefully things change rapidly, right? So by September, could we, see a complete about face with some of these states? I don't know. The problem is, as I'm sure you've identified, Mike, is that racers are trying to plan right now.
Yep.
And it's not ideal to just have things up in the air. And thus is the nightmare that has been the COVID-19 pandemic, right?
Yeah, I mean, it affected Power Tour, right? I mean, Alex knows this. Power Tour was supposed to be, I think, this week or next week.
Yep.
And, they moved that off to August.
And the thing is like, as you're mentioning with like racers planning, you're not, with drag week, it's not taking off 1 or 2 days. You're scheduling, a lot of people are scheduling a whole work break from it. It's, a week plus. And then it's crazy to say, but the preparation for that starts now. And it's such a long process to get ready for that. And so people are starting to wonder, and you can't blame them. Like, is it going to happen? Is it going to be pushed off like Power Tour? I mean, it's a valid question, even though it's months out, but like you said, there's just a lot of planning that goes into it. So I don't know. I'm
curious for you two that are like hardcore drag weekers. Mike, you've been telling me about your drag week exploits forever. Yours are obviously much publicized, Alex. For you two, as people who've done it, I'm just curious, from something of an outsider's perspective, would you rather not do it at all than do it differently than has always been done? Like, is it so good and so special that you'd rather not do it all than do it in some sort of butchered fashion?
I think it could be changed. I just think that with like the way the routes and everything's laid out, it would be something where the stories are made and stories to tell kind of thing if it gets butchered. Right. So like, something said there, something to that. But at the same time, like, can it actually be executed without just being a disaster if it's changed? I don't know. I'm not opposed to change, but I just don't know the execution process of it.
Right.
I'm a bit more selfish where, it's my 1 or 2 times a year that I can be on the other side of the events. So, I'm so desperate. I'll take whatever they give us.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and that's a really good perspective, man. And I think a lot of racers share that sentiment, Mike. There's such a pent up demand just to go do something that I have to believe that the fine folks over at Drag Week may be well served just to find some way to do it. Because God knows racers already come out in droves, and I'd say racers and fans will be out in droves here in 2020 with everything that's been going on. Great opportunity to segue here. Alex, I know you've been the last couple of weeks as we pour over these reaction time photos and videos and we see things upside down and on fire. I know that safety and just kind of a refresher course on safety gear and safety, an approach to all this stuff has been weighing heavily on you, Alex. Have at it.
So something I kind of wanted to highlight is, as we've talked about on the show, you know, safety is becoming a little bit more cool. You can be a cool kid and still wear your safety gear kind of thing. But we have seen some bad wrecks, fires, crashes lately. And something I just wanted to bring to attention and kind of maybe get your guys' perspective on it, because you would know more, is as private rentals start to take off, and that's something we're seeing because of Corona, and that different races have and different racetracks have different safety procedures. This different car counts change the safety that's at the track. I think that's something that we need to be conscientious of as we do these different events, or maybe not events and rentals, that the safety gear that you may expect or may be accustomed to might not be at the track. So maybe taking some precautions like for yourself to in an event that something does happen. Something worth mentioning and discussing, I think.
It's weird because I think what I've seen, and I'm seeing this, you see it with race teams across the board, everyone's out of rhythm, right? And I don't know about, I mean, speaking for myself and my business, you know, we headed into, you know, the pre-COVID moment where, you know, you're starting to get a rhythm. It's early in the season, you know, January, February, March hits, and you're starting to maybe not sprint, but like softly jog, right? And then the entire world stops. And I think the last 2 or 3 months has just thrown everyone off their program. I've seen it, like I said, you've got racers that, you know, teams and crew members that are in the pits that they forgot where something is, right? Or there's some silly little part of their program gets, because they're out of rhythm, they're out of routine. And I think that we've seen that a little bit from racetracks where it's just, it's been a minute. It's been a minute since they've had the pits full of cars. It's been a minute since they've had some sort of tough situation on the track that they have to handle. So I think it's going to be important maybe for tracks to do little refreshers, just act out a scenario, right? Hey, let's do a couple of run throughs of a top end fire. Let's do a couple of run throughs of a starting line explosion. Let's do a couple of run throughs of a driver can't get out, just to kind of get everybody back into the rhythm of dealing with these things, because we obviously never want them to happen, but unfortunately they do. I mean, in drag racing, especially at a high level, it's not necessarily if, more so when, so we might as well be ready for it.
Right. I think one thing to look at also is, you know, a lot of tracks, you know, delayed opening, you know, they're 2 months, you know, after they should have opened in a lot of parts of the country. And, you know, they're starting to look at budgets, and, you know, maybe you don't get, you know, 3 guys in a fire truck. Maybe you get 2, maybe you get the lesser expensive, and you hope tracks don't cut on that, because obviously people's lives are at stake, literally. Mm-hmm. But, you know, you have to be conscious of, you know, what service are they providing for the money that you're paying to be there? I mean, it's, you know, I think everybody would spend a little bit more money if it were to go towards fire safety if the track was looking to cut, you know.
I honestly wonder if, and this is something I saw someone post on social media the other day, like a receipt from a restaurant that had a COVID-19 surcharge. I'm not trying to give racetracks, you know, ideas on charging racers more money. Please don't, you know, string me up just yet. But I do think that it may be wise for track operators to make note of the fact that, like, hey, this extra $25 on your entry fee, or this extra $50, we have earmarked that for safety personnel or fire suppression services or whatever the case may be. Because
right? I mean, all these tracks have to get, you know,
manpower.
Yeah, mass, more people to police it. You know, hand sanitizer, all of these restrictions, and lower, you know, in some cases, lower fans in the stands.
Right.
So, you know,
it's such a conundrum, because expenses going up, revenue going down. It's about as tough of a situation as any entrepreneur or business owner could ask for. And I think that, you know, on a kind of closing note with this safety situation, I do think it's important to just remind racers that they are the final decision maker. You know, I'm the ultimate drag racer proponent. I'm 100% on the side of racers in virtually every scenario. And I encourage racers to recognize that it's their choice to put it in the beams, right? So if you haven't walked down and checked out the top end of a racetrack, or you haven't identified where some fire extinguishers are, or had those conversations with your crew, do so. And remember that at the end of the day, it's your call. If you don't feel safe with the guy that's in the lane opposing, or any situation in between, it's your call to throw the switch off and back up, right? So just a reminder to everybody out there that, especially at these smaller events that we're going to start to see, that, Mike, I believe we've talked in weeks past, that may be a format that becomes the norm for the foreseeable future. These small events, much like Donald Long's COVID-8 that took place this past weekend, and a handful of other events that have happened since the COVID pandemic, I wonder if it's going to be more and more important for racers to just be on top of these things. And I do think, Alex, you said it right at the beginning. It's never been more fashionable to be safe and on top of that stuff and have the coolest head and neck restraint and to have a fancy helmet and to have your visor down and to have good gloves and to have the right fire suit. I think it's cool that we've entered a time in drag racing history where it's cool to be the guy that's taking the additional precaution, because I don't think it was that terribly long ago that you kind of wanted to be the dude with your sleeves rolled up and a pack of smokes in them, you know, climbing behind the wheel of a Top Fuel car. So I'm glad to see the tides have turned. That's true. All right, moving on. Let's dive into the final thing. And this is just a little bit of, for me, I keep trying to identify, guys, the opportunities to better ourselves during this COVID-19 pandemic. There's been so many bad things. We just talked about a couple of them, right? Revenue down, expenses up. But I do think this opportunity to look around, to hit the reset button, to take the time necessary to plan and learn and try to improve operations. We've never had anything like this. So I look over at what NASCAR has done with Wednesday night racing. You see the ratings this show received, I believe, a couple, 2-3 times what they're typically used to with an event of this size and scale. To me, I can't help but wonder if there's not something to learn there by all of us in drag racing, not necessarily doing everything that NASCAR does, but don't you think now's the time, if there has ever been a time, is it not now to try something new? To step outside of the norm? What else are we going to do?
I think, Wes, you had mentioned on pre-show about, the Wednesday night NASCAR program. It was number 2 in the time slot, last Wednesday. Huge opportunity for NASCAR. The president of NASCAR has said in several interviews that, hey, we don't have any competition right now. Right. I think golf is the only other pro sport that's being played, but baseball, basketball, hockey, football, nobody's doing anything. So
what an opportunity. I have goosebumps. Literally, I'm so silly about this stuff, but I'm going, now is the time to expose the world to the great American motorsport. There's nothing better than drag racing. Heads up, drag racing. It is motorsport as God intended it. And now is the time to put this in front of everyone. And I can't imagine NHRA hasn't spent enough money with Fox over the years to get some sort of, to slide into a time slot, to fill a void. God knows that Fox Sports, there's not enough sports going on, as Mike said, to fill all the available time slots. Let's throw some drag racing in there with all these teams that are based out of, Indiana, Brownsburg, the greater Indianapolis area, or out in Charlotte, Mooresville, etc. There seems like there would be a layup of an opportunity to throw together some sort of drag race. And there's a couple of things that NASCAR did that I thought was exceptionally awesome. Racing at night. Drag racing at night is special, especially Nitro drag racing at night. We don't do nearly enough of this. If there's like a best foot to put forward for drag racing, it's nighttime Nitro racing, right? It's header flames over the roof and all this insanity. Glowing scoreboards in the night sky. There's so many opportunities. Why aren't we racing at night? And hey, let's do a no qualifying, unload them and drag race, right? I think that's pretty special itself.
There's great opportunity with, guys need to test, right? Teams need to test. And what better way to do it than put it on the air and just let them go, run an 8th mile. Just do something, anything at night, like you said, Wes.
So you are benefiting the teams from that perspective. And then something that racers and people in the industry love to talk about is how the sport may die. And we don't have, we're trying to this is the perfect time. We have a captive audience. And like you're saying, expose them to the most extreme and catch their attention with Nitro at night. The title works. That works.
Oh, I think you just named the show, Alex. I really think you may have just named the show. We should just stop now, because we could be running the programming. Nitro at night, sign me up. If Nitro at night was going on every Tuesday night or every Wednesday night for the foreseeable future, I believe the whole world's going to watch it. It's going to be, and it's just such an opportunity that I hope and pray that over the course of the next couple of weeks or months or however much more of this we have, I do hope that some of these opportunities are embraced. We do see, I mean, I look at Donald Long's COVID-8. I look at Keith Berry's Woodstock, the throwdown at T-Town that Keith Haney and Todd Martin put together. Those events all had, in my opinion, much greater significance than they ever have had at any point in the past, just because there's nothing else going on. Like all of a sudden, all eyes are on these events. That's not something unusual for Donald Long necessarily, but for Tulsa Raceway Park and Darlington Dragway, they took advantage of this opportunity to really thrust themselves into the big leagues of race promotion. And I think they're going to reap the benefits, reap the rewards of that for months and months to come.
No, it's I mean, like you said, it's just get in front of people, right? Put some teams on, on the air Tuesday night, 8 p.m. prime time. I mean, they talk about Street Outlaws all those years, and they have that set time every week. We'll get people used to watching it every Tuesday night. We're going to watch 8 p.m. We're going to watch, some kind of production, not a race, a production. And top cars and interviews, and not the hoopla of a national event, so they can get down and dirty and do a lot different programming than they normally would.
I'm telling you, that to me, and I know we've got to wrap this segment up, but that to me is such an that's how it needs to be portrayed. I look at the Street Outlaws model, where racing is obviously a part of it, but it's not the whole thing. I mean, there's so much to running one of these cars, and I'm not talking nuts and bolts. I'm just talking about the manpower, the decisions being made, the stressors that exist, or who do we got to run, or what implications does this have for the future of our program? There's so many storylines, and with so little going on, we finally had the time to explore a few of them. So anyways, here's hoping the drag racing gods embrace this moment in time to kind of put our sport out in front. And that's it for this week's Three Big Things.